Have you ever wondered how a 15-minute visit to the doctor for anxiety could spiral into a misdiagnosis of bipolar disorder, leaving you trapped on an antipsychotic medication and fearful you'll never get off? This is an unfortunate reality for many people, and this happened to today's guest, Mike. Stay tuned for his powerful story. So, Michael, I understand that you ended up with essentially a fake bipolar diagnosis because of some problems that happened with medications. Walk us through, how did this happen?
Yeah, so I mean, it was a series of unfortunate events, which happens to a lot of people. I mean, it was sort of like 2019, the end of 2019, one of my relatives committed suicide in a really ugly way. And I was sort of involved closely with investigating that and going out of Florida. And I got involved with that, and that caused all sorts of family drama. I was overworking, which many people do. I was putting too many hours in. I wasn't taking any vacation time. I had financial stress because my company at the time was not going well. I had a toxic client that I was working with. I mean, it was just like never ending. And it couldn't have been worse timing because it was going right into the beginning of 2020. And we all know what happened in 2020. So like 2020 rolled around. I had this whole new wellness plan, which was when I develop anxiety, I go hit the float tank. Flotation therapy for me became this sort of incredible way to regulate my nervous system. And I knew my nervous system was just dysregulated. So I did that, and my symptoms were gone in the beginning of 2020. But then I hit the road again, and I was traveling down in Florida. And what happened is the pandemic broke loose, and like all of a sudden my anxiety symptoms started coming back. Like I had an incident before where I developed some symptoms, agoraphobia, where I like fainted from anxiety. And then like I had this fear that it would happen in public, or it would happen when I was driving. So like now I'm down in Florida by myself, like, and this whole world pandemic breaks loose, and I'm basically stranded. So like, and then I'm like, now I can't go to the flow place because it's closed. I can't go to the gym because it's closed. I can't see people because it's closed. And like many people, you know, everything sort of started to spiral because of the pandemic. So I came back to Boston, and I was like, okay, like with all these things closed, like I need a plan to help me, because my anxiety was pretty bad at the time. Like I had psychogenic dizziness, like my body felt like it was like had balance issues. I had burning sensations in my legs. And these are all situational. Like it didn't even freak me out because I knew I could get through this. And I was like on a quest to find someone to help me because all of my holistic health things were not open. So I tried to find like mental health resources. And I describe it as like, it's like a part-time sales job. And I've worked in sales before, where like you're sending out cold emails being like, can you help me? I have these symptoms. Can you help me? And I got ghosted probably 9 out of 10 emails, because I think what was happening was that the pandemic was basically bogging down the entire system. So, and then to top it off, I get a physical injury, which was a pinched nerve injury, which was like creating this like feedback loop of like, I have nerve pain in my arm. That's causing anxiety, and the anxiety is making the nerve pain worse. So that was sort of like the beginning of this thing happening. Yeah.
And I mean, eventually you end up getting a script for an antidepressant, Paxil. Tell us that story. How did these problems end up eventually leading to that medication?
Sure. And it will probably sound like a very common story to a lot of people, I would say. So what I was doing, so around that time, it was like maybe April of 2020. I was like, okay, I have to find like mental health resources in the system that can help me. So I am on this quest to find somebody, and I finally caught a break, and I got this anxiety center based out of Boston, and the BU Center for Anxiety. So basically, I went to the BU Center of Anxiety. I said, listen, I know exactly what's happening. I have situational anxiety. It's caused by all these events. I don't think medication's necessary. My guard was up about SSRIs because I studied them in college, and I've heard about the bad incidents that can happen. I'm like, I don't need anything long-term. So I go to them like, listen, we just need exposure therapy. We need some sort of CBT or something like that. So while that's happening, I start another dialogue with my primary care. So the way that I used to use my primary care And the only medication I ever needed was like benzos. Like, give me 10 Xanax and I'll make it last 6 months. And that's all. I would take like a half a Xanax, like every I could make a bottle of 10 Xanax last 6 months, which is fine in my opinion. Like, it's not daily benzo use. Like, I avoided all of that at all costs. So I started a dialogue with my primary care, which was like, okay, I just need a little bit of Xanax to get me through this. I don't have any chronic mental illness, anything like that. So I'm using that just to get by. All right. So then the BU Center for Anxiety does the psych evaluation. So now it's like after months and months and months, the pinched nerve injury, like I am so frustrated. I do the psych evaluation at the BU Center for Anxiety. The psych evaluation, and I wanted that. I was like, if I was resistant to the meds, but I'm like, I'll do the psych eval. So the results of the psych eval were basically that I had panic disorder with symptoms of agoraphobia. Now, I studied the DSM in college, and I knew that that wasn't an actual diagnosis. It was just like I had symptoms of panic disorder with agoraphobia, which were all related to a specific event where I fainted. So, but the problem happened was what they were just dragging their feet. Like, it was so frustrating because, like, I finally said, I was like, let me speak to a psychiatrist. Like, these were social workers. They were grad students. And I was like, I know I don't really want to take meds, but let's schedule the meeting with the psychiatrist and just in case I need it. So like what's happening is like they never even wrote me back about that. So now I have a call with my primary care, the fateful call. And I have that call with him. And that night, the night before, I have a really bad night. Like I was trying to treat this nerve injury, and I had like a massage gun and I put it on my back and it like my spine, and it made like the nerve injury like flare up. So I had a really bad night. So I get on the call with my primary care physician. I schedule a call with him. It was already previously scheduled. And on that call, I was rattled. Like, I was like, listen, I actually cried. I was like, I broke down because I've been trying to find help for months. I said, I have an injury. I'm like in this pattern of physical injury where my nerve is causing me anxiety and it's now starting to cause sleeping problems. And like, not just like broken sleep, like no like difficulty falling asleep. So now I had already done the psych eval. So I was waiting for a prescript from the BU Center for Anxiety because we had the psych eval, which is, in my opinion, if you're going to take medication, do the psych eval. So he says, so I tell him the situation and he's like, I was like, and I talked to my mother because I was visiting my parents at the time. And she's like, Mike, you're really bad. Like, you know, consider something like more, like, cause I had trace amounts of clonazepam. I mean, like I was taking like quarter pills of 0.25 clonazepam. So then I give him the whole thing. And he's like, we can do two things. He's like, we can give you tizanidine or something for the nerve issue and muscle tension. So like we were trying to hit things on two levels. I think it was tizanidine or something like, begin with a T. And it was meant to be for like the nerve issue, right? And then he said Paxil, okay? So like, I was like, what is Paxil? And because I heard of Prozac, right? Like I had studied psych drugs in college and abnormal psychology. And I heard of Prozac. I never heard of Paxil at that point. I'm like, what is Paxil? He's like, oh, it's an antidepressant. So I'm like, wait, they prescribe like, so I'm like, I don't have depression, but this is this can be used for anxiety, which I never knew. I was like, I thought an antidepressant was used for depression. So I was like, yeah, I was like, okay. I was like, I mean, I was desperate. I mean, these people were ghosting me over at the BU Center for Anxiety. I said to him, I'm like, if you want to prescribe something, maybe we should talk to the BU Anxiety Center. It has the psych eval. I had a 4.5 hour questionnaire that I completed. Like, and he's like, oh no, we don't need to look at that. I was like, I've heard that people have committed suicide on these types of meds. Cause I had heard about like, the notorious stories of people that have had bad reactions to Paxil. And I quote, he said, that is typically an indication of the patient and not the drug. Right. That the Paxil, and he didn't talk about the black box warning at this point. All right. But, what they do is they sort of like this, they just downplay the black box warning. So
how old were you at the time?
This was late 30s.
You took it?
Yeah, this was late 30s. Okay. I was probably 37, 38 at the time.
Yeah.
So
that's crazy that they do that, because they make it seem like that the warning is completely overblown. That I hear two things. One, I hear a lot of responses like that where they'll say, people who have suicide attempts on the drug, it's the underlying condition, and it's just misconstrued. The other thing that I hear people say sometimes is, well, if you've got people who are depressed and you give them an antidepressant, it gives them a bit more energy, and, the energy kind of kicks in before the mood lifting effects kick in. And so it kind of pushes that, it pushes already suicidal people towards acting on it. And they try and make it sound like it's the whole story, but that's not the whole story, because these drugs, and I know we're going to go here eventually, these drugs can cause personality changes. They can cause behavioral changes. They can cause mania. They can cause like obsessive dark thoughts. And so there's all of these other ways where you really need to be giving someone a heads up, like, hey, you're taking a drug that's going to impact your mood. And it could be in a very negative way. And so if that's happening, consider it's the drug and come back and talk to me. And that's really what they should be saying. But I feel like they rarely say it like that.
Yeah, I mean, I was looking for a quick fix. I mean, this was like, if you had asked me at that point in time, if there was clear communication, and when I wrote my complaint to the medical board, I needed medication for maybe 6 weeks at the most. Like, it means like, and by the way, at this point, the agoraphobia was already going away. Like, I was already working through the agoraphobia, but like what was happening is this nerve injury was just pushing me over the edge. So I said, I was like, okay, there was no discussion of how long I needed to take it, which was my beef when I wrote the medical board. I said, if I needed medication to get me through a rough 6 weeks, like, why was I prescribed something that I was going to need to take for like 6 months, or was going to take 6 weeks to even work? I mean, it's just, it's mind boggling what happened during this conversation. So I was like, all right, I'll take it. I was like, I had no other options. He appealed to, I appealed to say, like, I did the psych eval and I was waiting for the psych eval before I took anything. And he's like, oh no, we don't need to do that. So then he gives me the script and here I am. Okay. And what happens after this is like unbelievable what happens after this. So I take it the first day. And I think it was the basic dose. I don't know what the basic dose is, but it was like the minimum dose that they typically, maybe 10 milligrams. I couldn't tell you exact. So I took it one day, and then I was like, I didn't feel anything really. Like, I did feel a little sad, like later in the day. But the funny thing about me is I've been through a lot of things in my life, but depression has never been a symptom. I mean, everybody that knows me knows that I'm always in a good mood. Like, I've always slept well. Like, I've never really had symptoms of depression at all. And I feel like a little bit of sadness the first day. I'm just like, okay, not a big deal. So then I take it the second day. And then this is when it starts to backfire. Okay. And so I remember I'm at the beach. I'm on Cape Cod at this time. And then I take it the second day and I go to the beach that day. And all of a sudden, my anxiety is like getting worse. Like, I can't even, like, I did have like, I mean, before Paxil even, I did have like anxiousness, like visible, like agitation. But I remember going to that beach that day and I couldn't even sit down. Like, I was like, wait, I'm like, like, I was also, but part of it was situational, which was like, I was like, well, then I started getting really disturbing thoughts in my brain that came out of nowhere. And I was like, I went inside my brain. It reminded me one time when I smoked marijuana, where sometimes people have bad reaction to marijuana when they go inside. But this was like really dark and twisted. And I'm sitting on the beach being like, my entire life, I knew that there was a risk with these medications. And now I took it and I'm like, I'm having really severe feelings of depression. And I never had feelings of depression until that. And I remember almost being compassionate to some of the people in my life that had depression, like severe depression. I'm like, is this what it feels like? Is this terrible? And I was like, what's happening? And then I go on Google and I'm like, I'm now reading about Paxil. I guess I wish I had read about Paxil and the risk before I had taken it. And I'm like, wait, I'm like, this guy gave this to me and it's a black box drug. And like, there's all sorts of risk associated with it. So, you know, I went inside my head and it was like violence. It was like destruction. And not that I was going to do anything to myself or anybody, but it was really disturbing what was going on in my mind at that point.
I mean, one thing that's been in the news, I know a lot over the last 10 years, is the link between antidepressants and, you know, impulsive suicide attempts or even homicidal behavior, with some people saying there really is this, you know, this link between people getting on these drugs and then doing mass shootings. I don't know if you could kind of comment on that, having experienced an adverse behavioral side effect on the medication that did lead. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, well, first off, I want to be completely clear. There was no intention that I was going to harm myself or anybody, but it was like I was having like disturbing thoughts. And what happened is, and I can talk about that, is so then that was happening. It was short lived. Like it was during the daytime. It was for like a half an hour, and I finally broke out of my brain. And then I got really angry because I was like, why am I in this? Like I didn't need anything beyond maybe like some benzos or whatever for a few weeks. So then it happened again in the middle of the night. That night, I go to bed. And then I wake up at 4 a.m. and my mind is blazing. Like my mind is blazing. I'm like, I couldn't even describe to you what it was happening in my mind. And I'm like, this is terrifying what's happening. And I was like violence and death. And I'm like, I could understand how someone, and as you know, the drugs can cause mania. If you gave this to someone that was mentally disturbed or had a history of violence or was abused as a child, or like, I could imagine that happening. And I know that's a huge controversy and everybody will fight to death, but this was just the beginning for me in terms of what happened. But it wouldn't surprise me. My thing, when everybody wants to talk about that, and you know, the media never wants to talk about it because they take all the money from they don't want to talk about that. If these drugs can cause mania, and if you give someone that is mentally disturbed a drug that can cause mania, then who knows what can happen. That's all I'll say regarding to that. So I wake up the middle of the night, it's 4 o'clock in the morning, and this drug was so powerful that I was like, I can't believe that we went nuclear. Like this is like going nuclear option here, in my opinion. Like this is a big deal. Like if you give someone SSRI, like you better be in real big trouble. And that's my position. Like not because you have a pinched nerve injury, not like if like, you know, there should be a screening. So I wake up and I'm rattled the next morning, right? This was essentially, I had taken the pill 2 days. I wake up the next morning. I call the hospital and I say, listen, I woke up in the middle of the night. I had disturbing thoughts. I'm like, I didn't say anything. I wasn't hard. It ended. It was short lived. Okay, fine. I was like, no harm done. It was a mistake, but I'm not taking this medication anymore. I want to talk to you guys and say, is it safe to stop taking this medication now? Because I don't know about the tapering. I know that you're not supposed to start. There's only 2 doses. I'm like, okay. They're like, stop taking it. Schedule a call with the doctor. Have a follow-up with him in 2 days. Okay. Now I'm rattled a little bit. But now I go back to my playbook, which was like, you know what? I'm not panicking about anything at this point. I say, here's what I need. I feel like the agoraphobia is going away. I'm like, the gyms are opening up, you know, like everything's opening up, right? So like all of these things that I could do to treat this condition are now opening up. So I send a lengthy note to the people at the anxiety center. All right. And here's what I say. I'm like, I tried the Paxil. It gave me racing thoughts. It was like rocket fuel, I guess is one of the things that I said. And I said, like, I'm not taking this medication anymore. It was an overprescription. I don't need it. I'm like, all I need is maybe some Xanax. Let's go into the program. Let's treat the ongoing anxiety symptoms. It's all related to my trauma. Like, you know, let's continue the plan. So she writes me back and she's like, oh, we need to talk to you like right away. We're concerned about you right now. I'm like, what do you mean? I'm like, we tried the Paxil. It didn't work. It was an overprescription. And I was upset with them because they were taking so long to get me into the program. So, I was, if they had given me a psychiatrist, I wouldn't have gone to the primary care. And I think the psychiatrist wouldn't have given me Paxil, to be honest with you. So they're like, oh, we need to talk to you. I'm like, they have to talk to me. I'm trying to tell them. I was like, we don't need to talk about anything. So we get on the call, and this is where this story is like, I describe it almost as like an episode of Seinfeld or Curb Your Enthusiasm in a dark and twisted way, where it's like they think I'm bipolar at this point, and like I'm not. I'm angry at them. So I get on the call with them, and I guess I was probably speaking fast. Now I was angry because like everything that was happening, like people that are angry speak fast, right? So I'm on the call with them, and I'm like, listen, I was like, I've been trying to do this for months. I took the Paxil. I didn't need the Paxil. I said, I tried to get a psychiatrist through you guys. It wasn't happening. They're like, oh, like, wait, hold, you're talking really fast right now, right? Now I had a cut on my hand because I had been riding a bike, and I fell and cut my hand. And they saw the bandage, and they're like, Mike, you okay? Did you cut yourself? I was like, did I cut myself? I'm like, I just fell on a bike. I was like, listen, this is all I need. I was like, I said, exercise makes me feel great. It's like magic. I was like, the flotation therapy makes all of my anxiety away. It's all I ever needed. They're like, oh, you sound like you're being like, you're going to go on a spending spree. You're going to buy a float tank? Like, aren't you having financial problems and stuff? I mean, I sort of was having financial problems because the company wasn't doing well. I lost most of my work, my contract work, because of the pandemic. So then they're like, all right, we want to go back to your psych eval. All right. And they go back to my psych eval, and they start asking me a series of questions. They're like, oh, tell me about this day. Like, you told us this one time, like you had difficulty sleeping, and like you had this really great idea and it kept you awake. I was like, oh yeah, like I had a business idea that I was in. Like, I was a creative person. Like, I had been passionate about entrepreneurship, and I was doing all sorts of different things. They're like, oh, like, tell me about that. Oh, okay. Yeah. Like, I couldn't sleep one night. I had racing thoughts about an idea. And like what was happening, what I didn't know what was happening is they were pinning me as someone that had bipolar. Even though they had a psych eval, like they were going back into my record. And this was the series of questions they were asking me. They're like, okay, have you ever been overconfident in your own abilities? Now, anybody that starts a business has to be overconfident in their abilities. A lot of entrepreneurs have hypomanic tendencies because you have to be really confident. Like, you have to be, in some cases, talkative. You have to be, and there is a link. Some people that are bipolar, there's some great, or they think they're bipolar, are entrepreneurs. So what they do is they start going through my record and start like picking and choosing like little things out, and like, oh, okay, have you ever started more projects and you didn't finish them all? Yeah, I had done like a video production project that didn't work out. I had this company that didn't work out. So I said, yes. So they're basically now, what I would later learn is they're trying to convince themselves that my psych eval missed something, which was that I was actually bipolar or having some form of hypomanic or manic episode, like that was leading up to this. And what was infuriating at this? Well, by the way, and I know the DSM here, and I studied bipolar furiously. If you have no sleep disruption, like, and you have and my sleep schedule for the last 20 years was I fall asleep at midnight every night. Like, my head hits the pillow every night. I'm asleep. They painted a picture that basically I was hypomanic. And I guess they talked me into convincing me. And I would later find out that they twisted my record, and I'll talk about that later, talking me into a corner to convince that I had like either cyclothymia or some sort of history of hypomania. So the call ends and like, listen, like, we think that they're like, we want to talk to your primary care. So like, give us your we'll release the information, the medical information. I'm like, okay, you can talk to primary care. And they're like, we think that you're experiencing hypomania right now. So now I have health anxiety, or I had a history of health anxiety, which is the worst thing you could ever do to someone that has health anxiety, is start to suggest all sorts of other diagnoses, right? So I refer them to the primary care. I said, you can contact them. Go ahead. Then they say this to me. They're like, oh, why don't you, we might think you're not a good fit for our program. Why don't you reach out to the people at McLean Hospital, which is the psychiatric hospital up in Massachusetts, right? They're like, they have a bipolar clinic. I was like, why would I go to a bipolar clinic? I'm like, wait,
let me jump in
Go ahead.
Quickly, because I know that's going to be a new chapter in the story, and I want to show you something which I think is really interesting. I'm going to share my screen just for a second here. Sure. And it's the drug label for Paxil. And so this is, so here's what we're looking at. We're looking at the drug Paxil, which is the one you were on. And I just want to show you how the gaslighting of what this drug is actually even carried out in the pharmaceutical companies and at the FDA. And so what we're looking at here is warnings and precautions. It's where they put the most important risks for the drug. And I know we talked about the suicide stuff before, but let's scroll down, because what we're really talking about now is this side effect here. So if I zoom in here, all of the antidepressants cause mania. They can make people have these manic type reactions where they seem really revved up. But what is really pathetic, I think, about the FDA and what is really misleading is how they describe the risk, because I do think it contributed to you getting misdiagnosed. Because here's what they say. They say in patients with bipolar disorder, treating a depressive episode with Paxil may precipitate a mixed or manic episode. And now it's a really important distinction because that they bring that clause in patients with bipolar disorder, because the way that they're wording it is the only people who are going to have these manic episodes have bipolar disorder. And it's very different from saying, hey, our drug may cause like mania or bipolar symptoms like in anyone. And it's just a genetic susceptibility. Maybe some people are more sensitive to the stimulating effects on the drug. They're not saying that. They're saying if you have a reaction to this drug, it means that you have bipolar disorder. And it's just a way of it's gaslighting, because it's not true. There's no way to prove it. And if you go down here, they say, 1% of the people in the clinical trial, bear in mind, this is a clinical trial that probably lasted about 8 weeks, had mania or hypomania, compared to 0.3% of placebo-treated patients. Again, this is not a clinical trial in patients with bipolar disorder. This is just people with depression. And so the idea that this only happens in people with bipolar disorder is just baseless. It's just wishful thinking from the pharmaceutical company, and they've convinced the FDA to allow them to word the warnings like this. And this is why doctors at the clinic, like the one that you went to, they're just like, okay, someone has, mood elevation on these drugs. They must have bipolar disorder. And so anyway, I just wanted to bring you up because this runs deep. It's deep in the FDA and in the pharmaceutical industry as well. And it's leading to people like you getting misdiagnosed, and it's terrible.
Right. That's right. Yeah. So, I mean, it is, like I said, it's like, but then the best part of this was humorous in a way, was like, have you been agitated for like whatever the DSM says, have you been agitated for like 5 days in a row, like more than most 75% of the day? Yes, I have been, because I'm in the system and I can't get help. You guys are slow, right? Oh, you sound agitated, right? Oh, like, you know what I mean? It's like, oh, I must be manic now because I'm agitated by what's happening. So then they're like, okay, so now again, like you go back to someone with health anxiety. I mean, my advice to anybody that works in the system, like the last thing you should ever do to someone that has a history of health anxiety is like suggest that they have a new diagnosis in any capacity. Because like anybody else, they're going to go to Google and they're going to start searching for mania, hypomania, bipolar, which is obviously what I did. So I'm starting to freak out a little bit, right? Because I'm like, oh, maybe something's going to happen on this medication. So they contact my primary care, and I had a follow-up with my primary care after this discussion. And I talked to my primary care. My primary care has known me for 20 years. They talked to him, and I would later find out what they talked about. They told him they thought I was having a hypomanic or a manic episode, and that the Paxil was either precipitated, started, or I was in the middle of an episode. And I talked to him, and me and him are aligned. We're like not even like sounding any form of alarm at this point. Because like when I tell you that I had racing thoughts, they were short-lived. They were like, okay, I had like whatever happened on the beach. I had it in the middle of the night and it was gone. It was like, I'm moving on. So me and him were like, I can't believe they're telling me to go to a bipolar clinic at the McLean Hospital, because I don't even know what they're talking about. Because like Nothing's going on. I mean, the agoraphobia is gone. Essentially everything that they diagnosed is gone. It's like the symptoms are gone. It's like I have no longer the symptoms I went in for, and now I have all sorts of new symptoms. So then all of a sudden I get them. Now, by the way, this has been months and months and months of trying to find somebody. I get an email from them, Mike, we're discharging you from the program. I was like, you're discharging me from the program? Oh, we don't treat people with we don't treat bipolar patients. I was like, I was having they stopped talking to me. Like they were discharging me from the program. I needed help at that point. So now it's like, I had been looking for someone for months. I'm dealing with a primary care physician who I knew at the time didn't know what he was doing because he gave me Paxil in the first place. So now I'm like a fish out of water. So the night that I spoke to them at the anxiety center, I fell asleep at midnight like I usually do. I slept like 6 hours. All right. And the disturbing thoughts are gone. The racing thoughts are gone. And like now I'm not working. All this contract work was gone because like the summer was going on. And then this is when it really takes a turn I didn't even see it was coming. So I remember it was like maybe the second day after Paxil. Like they discharged me from the program. I have anxiety, but again, it's not up until that point. It was not like difficulty falling asleep. So I remember that night I go to bed. And I go to bed at midnight every single night. And by the way, if I was either manic or hypomanic, I wouldn't be going to bed at the same time every night. Like my sleeping pattern was always the same. So I go up in bed that night at midnight, the same time. I'm not doing anything unusual. I watch TV in the evening. I go up, I lay in bed. And I'm laying there and I'm laying there and I'm laying there. And again, like my body would just always fall asleep. And my anxiety never bothered me at night. And I look at the clock and it's 1, it's 2, it's 3. I'm like, wow, I'm like not even tired. I'm like 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. It's 8 o'clock in the morning and I don't feel tired at all. I don't have any racing thoughts. I'm not like there's no melatonin producing in my body. I'm like, okay, I probably have like some withdrawal effect, where it's like the drugs leave my system. It's like the second day off of the medication or whatever. So I'm like, okay, like now I'm up for 24 hours. So I wake up and I'm not even tired. I've been up for 24 hours and I'm not even tired. I'm not manic. I'm not running around. I'm laying in bed trying to sleep. So I'm like, okay, well, I'm not working. Like, let me get out and be active today. So that day I'm like, let me go walking in the trails. Let me get some exercise, try and get my mind. I do that. At that point, I don't think anything was visibly wrong other than me. I was staying in my parents' house because of the pandemic at the time. And like nothing was really unusual happening. But then I go up to bed again that night. And then I'm telling you, I probably broke the record for insomnia. Like that I went to bed that night and I'm like, okay, I'll probably fall asleep like I always do. And I lay in bed at midnight. I'm laying there and I'm not like particularly anxious. But like it just feels like there's my brain, like there's no circadian rhythm that there's. And I tried to describe to people, like when you tell people you have insomnia, they sort of we all have this memory of like, oh, well, like you're thinking about a couple things and and up until this point, like even with the extreme anxiety that I was having, like it wasn't that. It was like there was this just physical wakefulness that like wasn't like allowing me to sleep. So I'm up. Now I'm up again. Now it's like 8 o'clock in the morning now. And I'm like, okay, what do I have now? I've been discharged from the program, right? So I can't talk to them. I'm like, all right, I have like trace amounts of clonazepam. I'm like, let me take a little bit of clonazepam to try and sleep. Like literally like 0.25 milligrams of the lowest dose of clonazepam. So I take like maybe like a half of those pills and I sleep. I don't even know if I slept. Maybe it was like an hour. Maybe it was like 2. I don't even know, but I wasn't even tired. And what happened day after day after day was like that and again, it wasn't mania. I wasn't running around, although I believe they convinced me it was mania later, that sleep was no longer a part of my existence, that I was just, my circadian rhythm basically just stopped. And that when I would go to bed at midnight, I was not tired and that I would be up the entire night and I would be totally full functioning the next day. So this starts to happen for like days. And I'm taking like minuscule amounts. And I'd say I was sleeping 2 hours. Like I can't even describe like what was happening in my brain, because that up until that point in my lifetime, falling asleep at night was like unheard of. It was 5 nights a year. So now I'm freaking out here because I'm like, something's wrong.
This is all happening within the week of like coming off the Paxil, right?
That's right. Like 2 days.
Yep.
The first night of insomnia was essentially the second day without Paxil in my system. It was like the next day within my system, I fell asleep. I slept maybe 6 hours. And it was in my record, in my psych eval. There was nothing in my psych evaluation about having difficulty falling asleep at night. Nothing. Even when I had gone to, and then I was like, okay, what's happening now? Like, am I experiencing like a manic episode or a now I'm going to Google. I'm like, oh, okay. What is antidepressant associated hypomania? What is mania? Like I'm turning into my psych undergrad background and like researching. So like this insomnia is unbelievable. Like, and it wasn't manic insomnia. And that's one of the crucial points that never came out of all of the questioning that they gave me. Like there was no one ever asking me, like, tell me when you can't sleep, tell me what you mean. Right? Like, so basically like, a week goes by and I'm on next to no sleep after a week. Like I'm on like 2 hours a night, purely aided by clonazepam. And I'm now starting to get like symptoms of psychomotor agitation. Like I was like, they broke my brain. I was like, my brain is injured. Like, because I don't know what's happening, that it's like everybody else is on the circadian rhythm. And like my brain is no longer on the circadian rhythm. So like, I don't know what to do. I'm like, can I go to like the emergency room and tell them that I have insomnia? I'm like I wasn't doing like, so then like I contact my primary care again. Now these guys kicked me to the curb, which I think is absolutely absurd, that company, because they could have nipped this all in the bud right away. They could have been like, if they had given me the psychiatrist, oh yeah, you have insomnia, because I didn't have psychomotor agitation at that point or anything like that. So I go to the primary care physician a week later after I stopped the Paxil, and I say to him, I was like, I have tremendous insomnia. I was like, what can you do for insomnia? Oh, okay, we can try something called Ramelteon. Right? So I guess it's like a stronger version of like melatonin. So he gives me like and by the way, I had no doubt in my mind that this was not going to do anything, because it felt like it was a different part of my brain that was like I knew that melatonin was not going to stop this insomnia, whatever was happening. So I take the Ramelteon as it was prescribed. Oh no, this was even worse. He sends me the script from Ramelteon. The insurance company rejected the script. So now I'm like, okay, so they prescribed me the Paxil. They created symptoms that I didn't have before, but now the remedy is supposed to be the Ramelteon. So now I'm getting like intense. I'm starting to get like periods of panic that are like, I have to go to the hospital. And it would just like dawn on me, like something's really going wrong. And I don't know what it is. So I'm getting like worse and worse. So he gives me the prescription of Ramelteon. At this point, me and him didn't think I needed psychiatric hospitalization, because I talked to him and I wasn't probably hypomanic or manic in any way. Like, so we're not panicking at all. But the problem with what the anxiety center did was like they were raising the red alarm, which was like, I need to worry that something bigger and worse is going to happen from this. So I get the Ramelteon, it does nothing. It does nothing. And now I'm on like 2 hours of sleep for a night for like 7-10 days. And you will be, I describe it to people, it's like psychological torture. Like it's like you've been like sleep deprivation at that level is like psychological torture. So I'm finally like, I have to do something about this. I'm like, because I can't sleep at all. And my dad's like, listen, we can get you into this like partial hospitalization program, right? Like to figure out what's going on. Now I'm starting to get like, psychomotor agitation instances. Like my legs were like shaking uncontrollably at times. Like it would happen later as like things got worse. The insomnia was worse. So I
want to take a minute here just to kind of talk about what's going on, because I think it's interesting. So, well, the first thing that I'll bring up is, did you follow the Thomas Kingston story that happened recently?
Oh yeah, about the guy that had insomnia and he killed himself. Is that right? From the royal family? Is that the story?
Exactly. Yeah. So this is a really similar story to yours. So this is the so extended family member of the royal family, 45 years old, having work stress, and he goes to see the physician that looks after the royal family, and they put him on an SSRI, the same class of medication of Paxil. He responds poorly to it. He stops taking it after 2 days. He goes back. They give him a new SSRI. He takes that for another couple of days, and then he stops it. And within a couple of weeks, or 2 to 3 weeks, he unexpectedly takes his own life. Now, I think if it was anyone else, they'd just go, it's due to his underlying mental health condition, and they would just write it off. But because of who he was and because of how unexpected it was, a coroner's inquest took place where they interviewed everyone in his family, work colleagues, and such, and no one could understand how he could have done something that was so out of proportion to the stresses in his life. And it really sounds like it could have been very similar to what was going on with you, because what can happen is you can get exposed to a medication, and if you have a really bad reaction to it, it's almost like getting a concussion. So some people think, oh yeah, I take the drug, I have the side effect, within a handful of days, the drug's out of my system and all the effects should be gone. But that's not really what we see for many people. For some people, it's like you've had a really big adverse reaction. It's rocked your nervous system. It's kind of destabilized it. For whatever reason, you've responded in a really negative way. And now it's like your brain has been hit, and it may take up to a month, maybe 2 months, sometimes even longer for some people, for the brain just to kind of come back online again. And I bring this up because doctors don't know this when this happens with adverse reactions with these drugs. And I want to contrast it to what happened with you. You were told that you had a bipolar diagnosis, and your mind was just going wild. What's happening? Why am I feeling so unwell? Why am I agitated? Why am I having a hard time sleeping? And there was a different narrative which they could have told you. They could have said, Michael, I'm so sorry this happened. We don't really know what this means, but you may have had an adverse reaction. Most of them may resolve, within a couple of weeks. And so we're going to watch you closely. We can give you something symptomatic to help, some symptomatic treatment to help with the anxiety. And let's just see what happens. These are two very different narratives that you could give someone in this situation. One of them fills them with fear and sends them off to a bipolar, disorder clinic and gets them on antipsychotics. The other one is more reassuring, and it's this kind of, watchful waiting, and it acknowledges that the drug may have harmed you. And so just an interesting, it's interesting how what they told you really sent you in one direction. So please go on.
Yeah. But what's crazy, like I said, even that, but that wasn't even the sleep problem, and that's where people will always like sort of gaslight me, like, well, you just had a lot of anxiety, you couldn't sleep. No, like it was the type of insomnia where like sleep just was no longer part of my functioning. Like I was just perpetually awake, but I wasn't manic. Like I wasn't running around and buying things and and they thought I was going to go on a spending spree because I wanted to buy the float tank. And they thought because I was in California that I was in Miami that I was having a manic episode. The funny thing about that was like, I was an entrepreneur, and I was like, a lot of entrepreneurs are doing these types of risky things financially. And they're painting this picture, like you said, like, oh, this guy must be bipolar and we didn't catch it. So basically what happens is, now they fuel the fire even worse because they discharge me from the program, right? So now I have nowhere to go. So I'm like, okay, I have to go to the hospital. I have to go. I didn't have to go inpatient. At that point, I was like, I did call McLean Hospital about the outpatient bipolar clinic. And I was like, they ghosted me. Like I said, no one was responding to calls. Like I asked the people at the hospital where my doctor was at, I'm like, can you get me a psychiatrist? Like, oh yeah, we'll get you a meeting with a psychiatrist in 3 months. 3 months for an acute situation, right? So I have to go to the emergency room. So now the day that I go to the emergency, the reason I went to the emergency room was to get into a program where they could help me, because it was the only way in. They're like, you can, do this politic or whatever, or like you go to the emergency room, you tell them when you're in trouble, they'll let you into the psychiatric program. So I go to the emergency room, and I was actually like, I remember sitting in the lobby, and it was my dad or my brother that dropped me off. And I was like sort of calmly sitting in the lobby, like wasn't really demonstrating any symptoms of mania or anything like that. So I'm in the emergency room, and then like I go in and I start talking to the social worker. Now it's the middle of the pandemic. We all have our mask on. I'm out in the hallway because the hospital is filled with people that are suffering from the pandemic. So they basically, the social worker starts talking to me, and I was like, I'm ruminating like wildfire. Okay. Meaning like I'm severely anxious at this point. I'm on like hardly any sleep for like almost 2 weeks at this point. And I'm like, I was in California and this happened. I was in Florida and this happened. And then I came back and then this and this happened. And I had the pinched nerve. I'm ruminating, obviously. And I told them about the Paxil. And they gloss over the Paxil, by the way. For all the people that I dealt with in the psychiatric program moving forward after this, the last thing on their mind was anything to do with the Paxil. Although I think they knew that was part of it. But so I'm ruminating. She's like, oh, by the way, you might have a mild version of bipolar disorder. So now again, it's like you said, he's like, now you have an anxious patient that has a history of health anxiety. And now you're telling them that they might have a new disorder that my psych evaluation didn't exist 2 weeks ago. Mm-hmm. So that day I'm at the emergency room and I'm like, can I stay here tonight? I'm like, I can't sleep at all. Like if you discharge me, like I am not going to sleep at all. And they're like, well, are you a harm to yourself or others? And I was like, no, I couldn't say it because it wasn't true. It wasn't true. So I'm at the hospital. They plant the seed again, the bipolar seed, right? Even though I told them, I was like, I never had insomnia before I took Paxil.
The only thing that changed since you did that assessment was you took Paxil and you had an adverse reaction to it. That's right. That's the only thing that's changed in your life.
That's right. Yeah. So then they discharge. So then they're like, okay, we're going to put you on our partial hospitalization program over Zoom. Because it was, the pandemic. They were doing partial hospitalization programs over Zoom. They're like, that starts on Tuesday. So now it's Friday. Mm-hmm. So I'm like, so wait, like I don't have any feeling in my brain's chemistry that I am going to sleep at all for the next 4 nights. So they give me Ativan. They don't give me any sleep medication or anything. They plant the seed that, geez, well, maybe I do have a bipolar diagnosis. So they give me Ativan, and then Ativan makes me feel good. It definitely gave me like anxiety relief. Like, I was a little bit high on the Ativan that night. Then I come home, I'm back sitting down on the couch again, watching TV, my usual time, not manic, not running around, not spending or buying anything. I'm sitting on the couch. I'm like, there's no effing way I'm falling asleep tonight. Like not because I'm anxious, but because the chemicals in my brain just don't allow sleep anymore. So sure enough, that night I go up, I lay in bed. It's midnight. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 8 o'clock in the morning. Okay, let me take my trace amount of clonazepam. I think my primary care at the time had given me more Xanax when I spoke to him. I was like, can I have a little bit of Xanax? So I take it again, and then I remember it was like a Saturday. And like now I'm getting really bad. Like this was after I had been in the emergency room, like between when I was in the emergency room to like the day that I started the program. So I remember that day, like I have a friend down here in the Cape, and I was like, I went to the beach, and I was like, that day, like, I was like, I feel like my brain is injured. Like my brain is damaged. Like in my opinion, this was like brain damage. Like you said, like an injury, because I've never experienced, like to this day, it's like terrifying. The thought of that insomnia. It's like the most terrifying insomnia. So Sorry. So that day, I'm like, I go to see my friend and I'm like, listen, they damaged my brain. They gave me a medication that can cause mania. And I was like, it has a black box warning and I feel like my brain is damaged. So I had suicidal thoughts that day. Like I was like, and I wouldn't say that that was caused by the SSI directly, but if you're awake for like 2 weeks, like you're like pushing the edge of like sanity.
Yeah.
So
you feel like you're losing your mind. I mean, you're
right.
having suicidal thoughts. They're coming out of nowhere. You can't concentrate. You can't think clearly. Like your memory is shot to pieces. I mean, you feel like you're going crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. But I didn't have any like, and again, I would say like people are going to, you know, they would listen and be like, oh, I'm demonizing SSRIs. I'm like, that was secondary. I think it was the insomnia. Like the thing that my takeaway was that SSRIs have that risk, but I think the suicidal ideation was like largely from the insomnia where like I thought my brain was damaged and there was nobody to fix it. So now I have now I wasn't going to do anything, which is good. I was never going to do anything. So I have the session with the intake people I have my first day in the program on Tuesday. Okay. So now it's like post-discharge from the ER. It's like 4 nights without sleep. So now I show up to the discharge thing and I am a mess. I mean, I am sitting at the desk like we're sitting here and my legs are shaking like uncontrollably. Okay. Like, and I am like talking like I am like really fast probably and like disjointed. And I even remember the night before the weekend, actually, the night of the incident at the beach, I was like, my whole body was like bent. Like, I don't know why I was doing it, but like I was in my bed and my whole body was like bending and twisting and like out of this like tremendous agony that like I had like some sort of brain injury and I didn't know what was happening to me. So like I go to the program on Tuesday and I'm like, I tell him the whole story going back to LA and the incident of me driving and I'm in Florida and I had financial problems and I'm a creative person and I'm ruminating and I am like a mess because now it's like 3 days post like discharge in the ER. They're like, oh, he sounds like he's bipolar too. I hear the two associates talking to each other. Like, do you like to drive like fast motorcycle? Like, you know, are you into extreme sports? Are you into this? Like, so they're painting this picture again, which is that I have bipolar disorder. I'm like, I'm telling you, I'm the most mild-mannered person you ever met. And anybody that knows me prior to this, I was easygoing. I never get mad. I'm like, I would never get into arguments, like a completely stable lifestyle. So they're like, yeah, like, you know, and I told them my history, like trauma, like how my brother died when I was a child and I had a history of trauma. And I'm a candidate for, you know, bipolar, having lived through so many traumatic events, but I'm a holistic health person. I had been, very successful with my career and I've learned about health and wellness. And I was taking charge of my life at that point and dealing with my past trauma. And they're like, oh, well, you know, so here we go. You know what happens next, right? Here's Seroquel. All right. They're like, okay, here's this medication, Seroquel. And they're like, you know, we want you to take this Seroquel. And I am terrified of Seroquel. I'm terrified of Seroquel because up until a month ago, before I took Paxil, my position was always like, I just had situational anxiety. I always slept great unless I was working too much. I used to sleep 8 hours a night before all this. If I had like no work stress or whatever, I'd always fall asleep at midnight. I sleep 7-8 hours. Like I was a completely stable person. So I was absolutely terrified of Seroquel at that point because, you know, the rabbit hole. I knew the phrase, the rabbit hole, which was like one thing leads to the next, leads to the next, leads to the next. And well, what happens if I take Seroquel and I kill myself? Like that was like legitimately in my head at that point. I was just at the beach the other day and I'm thinking about drowning myself in the ocean. And now these people want to put me on something else. And then I Google Seroquel and I'm like, oh, well, Seroquel can cause this, this, and that. So I am absolutely terrified of taking anything else. So like my parents are here and they're like, this is an emergency at this point. I was like, okay, they call me. They're like, so I call the emergency room And I was like, guys, I was like, I'm very nervous about taking Seroquel right now because I had a really bad reaction to Paxil. I never had any symptoms of insomnia. I never had anything before this happened. And I'm talking a mile a minute, right? So now I'm feeding the whole narrative here, which is that I am actually having a manic episode. Now I'm not even having the racing thoughts now, but I was having psychomotor agitation. I'll tell you that. I was in this house now. I was walking up and down the house. Like I couldn't sit down. I'm trying to sit in the chair and I can't sit down. I walk upstairs. I come back down. I walk upstairs. And I'm like,
is this on the Seroquel or is this before the Seroquel?
Before the Seroquel.
Okay. Yeah.
So it's looking at mania. I mean, at that point, this had looked like mania, like visibly from the outside. But again, it was absent any of the main, like I said, any of the racing thoughts. Racing thoughts were not keeping me up at night. So then they're like, I'm like, so I have a lengthy conversation. I'm a motor mouth talking to this guy at the hospital. I was like, I just want to be supervised. That's it. I'm like, and I'm talking to my mother. I was like, Mom, I'm like, I don't know if I'm going to hurt myself if I take this medication. Not that I would, or I had any thoughts of that, but I'm like, I just want to be supervised. So they're like, we're going to give you this script for Seroquel. And I go get this. My mother gets the script and they're like, okay, we'll give you 50 milligram. You can take a 25 milligram. I take the 25 milligram and my anxiety goes down, right? My anxiety goes down. I'm like, okay, I'm okay, right? Like it was relieving my anxiety, which is what it's meant to do. So I end up going to the emergency room again. So now I'm going to the emergency room for a second time, not because I really needed psychiatric hospitalization, but it was because it was like the clinic that was treating me had discharged me, right? So like now I'm going back to only resource that I know is there. And now I'm giving them another red flag, which is that, like he did the onboarding to like the psychiatric program. Like the day that I was onboarding to the program, I went to the emergency room that night after they gave me the script for Seroquel. Because I had obviously anxiety about the medication. Like I didn't want to take anything else. I was like, I don't want, because it's going to be one thing to the next. So that night, and I'll tell you, it was the greatest sleep of my life. I went to the hospital. I calmly went into the hospital. I show up in the emergency room. I was like, they gave me a script for Seroquel. I was like, I just want supervision because I don't want any more adverse reactions. I give them the medication. I mean, I didn't give them the medication. I go in. I say, they gave me a script for Seroquel. I fall asleep. I slept 5 or 6 hours for the first time in 2 to 3 weeks. So, but I did tell them that I was potentially a harm to myself or others. That was like, I said that over the phone. I didn't say that I was right now, but I said that if I take anything else without supervision, I am concerned about that. Basically, they are, so I see the guy in the psych ward the next day and I'm in the psych ward that day and I am rambling about everything that happened. And then I'm like, this happened in California and I was on a trip and I went to Florida. It's like it sounds like a manic episode, but it was just like business travel. And then I took Paxil, I couldn't sleep, yada, 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 yada. So he says to me, he's like, listen, he's like, I'm not going to label with any diagnosis right now. But he's like, the one thing I will say is if this pandemic didn't happen, I know you wouldn't be here right now. There was nothing. And it said, and in my discharge notes, it said like manic episode, mild improving. So they put in my notes that I had a manic episode. All right. So I believe that I had a manic episode at that point, but I think all of the details of the insomnia and all that stuff would prove otherwise. And I had talked about that with a psychiatrist in the future, but that's a terrifying proposition, right? I mean, you go from having situational anxiety to taking 2 Paxil, almost accidentally, to all of a sudden they're telling me I had a manic episode. So then I discharged the program. I'll fast forward a little bit here. I go into the partial hospitalization program. There's no awareness or no acknowledgement that Paxil had any role in any of this. And I go in and I say to them, I'm like, guys, I never had insomnia before. Oh, well, no. Oh, you talk about here and this happened and you were doing. There was total gaslighting the entire program. All right. So they discharged me from the program. I do the 2-week program. I mean, if things couldn't get any worse here, now they ratchet me up to 200 milligrams. Now I'm on 200 milligrams of Seroquel. I'm on because I'm visibly reporting a lot of anxiety during our sessions. I'm ramping up for 25, 50, 100, 200. They had me between 200 and 300 milligrams a day of Seroquel at that point. So then what happens is then they discharge me from the program. And then I remember the psychiatric nurse practitioner, when they discharged me, was like, now again, the people that work in the field should never say what this person said to me. She's like, I say to her, I was like, now at this time, I'm maybe on like 200 milligrams of Seroquel. And now I'm Googling Seroquel and I'm like, okay, I guess because I'm taking Seroquel, I must be bipolar. So, and I had a manic episode. So the nurse practitioner is like, oh, I tell her, I said, this never happened before I took Seroquel. I mean, before I took Paxil. Never. Well, here's the truth. Most people that take Paxil and this happens, they have bipolar disorder. And it was like, I did a psych evaluation 2 weeks ago that said that there was no mood disorder at all. So this story gets even worse, and I'll fast forward it through you. But if it couldn't get any worse, it gets worse. They discharged me from the program. I'm a mess, but I'm medicated. Now I'm heavily medicated. I'm on 100, 200 milligrams. But in reality, they're not really treating mania here. I think they're treating post-traumatic stress disorder because I am rattled. I mean, this was just so disastrous what happened. And no one in the entire system believes what I'm telling them. So they basically they discharged me in the program. They give me a nurse practitioner. I'll tell you, she never even talked to me. I talked to this nurse practitioner once every other week. And all she said to me every single time is, you got to start taking less and less Seroquel. You got to take less, you're taking too much. So now I'm going for 200 milligrams to 100 to 50, in a matter of they were rapid tapering me. Okay. And then I think it was maybe and I was waiting anxiously to talk to the psychiatrist, and the psychiatrist that I spoke to, the program gave me months later, was she validated finally what I said, which was, this was all Paxil. No one under her level of expertise would say anything about the Paxil. She's like, oh, you're going to be fine. She's like, this is a one-time thing. It happened because of the Paxil, yada, yada, yada. So then what happens though is they start pushing me down on the Seroquel. And they're like, oh, we want to get you off of it. If you don't want to get off of it, we're going to put you on Zyprexa. So now they're basically telling me okay, we're going to give you something else because we want you to get off the Seroquel. So they basically are rapid tapering me. I would say it was crash landing a plane, where it's you got somebody here that's traumatized, that's suffering because of the harm the system's doing. And now you're telling him that well, if you don't rapid taper, we're going to put you on something else. And I'm I'm not taking anything else at this point. I was I'm done. I said Seroquel and that's it. So now I had this floating tank set up at my house at that point because I needed it, because I was treating PTSD, and you can use floating to treat PTSD. So the unfortunate event happens that the float tank, I thought it had a leak, so I had to take it down. So now I'm self-treating this trauma, and I'm rapid tapering a drug, and they're mixing melatonin. They're you can mix the melatonin with the Seroquel to sleep at night. So then what happens is I start to rapidly deteriorate, again. And the nurse practitioner is nowhere to be found. And I remember I woke up one day when I was down from 200 to 25 milligrams of Seroquel, and I was angry as hell. I was I almost want to die, because now I might have bipolar disorder that I didn't have 2 weeks ago. And I'm reading all of this literature that says you could develop bipolar disorder from SSRIs. So that night,
but now it sounds like it's coming because of the withdrawal, because you're getting tapered off the Seroquel too quickly.
Yeah. So basically, which I would learn later. So then what happens is they rapid taper me. I start to destabilize. I'm I have to go to the hospital again. I'm my anxiety is through the roof. And then I remember that night, I was I almost wanted to die. And then I did a mock suicide attempt with a belt. And I was wait, because what was happening? So that happened that night. And the reason it happened is because they had rapid tapered me so fast that my entire system was the Seroquel stopped working. So that night I took I was on 25 milligrams, and then I'm laying in bed and I'm having an anxiety attack. And they're like, I'm taking another 100, another 100. Now I'm up to like 800 milligrams of Seroquel in a day. And I'm taking like a little bit just to try and put me back to sleep. Yeah. So then I have to go back to them again. I go back to them again and I say, she rapid taped me off the Seroquel. I have like PTSD because of what's happening. And then I'm getting insomnia again, even though I'm taking hundreds of milligrams of Seroquel. And I'm like, why can't I sleep on? I'm like, I guess I'm having another manic episode because like, now I have rapid cycling. Now I'm going crazy. I'm like, oh my God, I have rapid cycling. Like I'm masking the second manic episode with Seroquel. Mm-hmm. So then I take over 800 milligrams of Seroquel in a day, like in little tiny doses just to put myself to sleep. I go back to the emergency room again. And I'm like, I took 800 last night. I couldn't sleep.
How did you make it out of this whole thing?
Yeah. So what I learned, and this is the hope for all your viewers here, I think, is that, like it turned out my friend of all people worked in big pharma. All right. And he was a pharmaceutical sales rep. And when I told him, and he worked in like this industry of bipolar and Seroquel, and I told him what happened, I was like, Paul, they put me on Paxil. I couldn't sleep. He's like, they put me on all this Seroquel. He's like, listen, this happens all the time. He's like, you get people on SSRIs, they show up in the emergency room, they're talking, and like he was involved, he knows all about this. And he's like, oh yeah, he's like, Mike, there's no way that you have bipolar disorder. He's like, you had an adverse reaction. You walk in the door, they don't know you, they don't know anything about you. They tell you that you've been awake for weeks, you can't sleep, you had financial problems, you have a creative mind. They're telling you you're bipolar, happens all the time. And I was like, wait, I'm like, listen, so why was I back in the hospital? I had to go back to the same hospitalization program again, another 2-week program. I go to the, and I'll close out the story with the happy ending soon, but this is an important detail you should hear. Mm-hmm. So I go back. So when I'm back, my second 2-week period at the psych program. I'm like, wait, I do have a document that shows that I had no mental illness before this happened, right? The psych evaluation before the Paxil. So I go back to the anxiety center. I'm like, can you give me the document that says what my diagnosis was? And so I can present it to the people now that I'm back in the program to say that I don't have bipolar. They changed the document. Oh my God. They twisted the document. So basically when you open the document, my original diagnosis that had no mood disorder said panic disorder, which was already gone. At the very top, it said Mike admitted to a hypomania. He was grandiose on the call, yada, yada, yada. They actually changed the documentation. So now I couldn't bring that document to the hospitalization program to prove that I didn't have a pre-existing condition. So the fast forward ending, the happy ending, the good story about all this is my friend tells me the deal. He's like, this is a huge problem in the medical community. We have primary care physicians. They should be doing a psych evaluation before they prescribe SSRIs. They don't do it. They should be doing a bipolar screening, which, by the way, I don't know how it's legal to prescribe SSRIs if you don't do any form of bipolar screening. And I brought that up to the medical board. So he basically explains to me, he's like, Mike, this is all a big sham. He's like, you don't have bipolar. You never had these symptoms. I've known him for 30 years. He's like, these primary care physicians should not be prescribing these types of meds, and then misread the entire situation. He's like, you're going to hire a good psychiatrist. There are a lot of them. Hired a Harvard-educated psychiatrist. I told her exactly what my friend said to say. Walk in the door, say, this all happened from Paxil. No history of mania, no insomnia, no depression. I finally convinced her. I'm like, listen, we can come off the Seroquel. So at that point, it was like, I'm on 500 milligrams of Seroquel. And she's like, we can get you off Seroquel because I believe you, right? The first person in the system that believed me. And we slowly over the course of like a year was like 12.5. She's like, slower than you want. 12.5 milligrams every week. Boom, 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 off. But the turning point for me and everyone that, has run into a similar situation is you have to learn. Like you have to go and look at these resources that talk about these types of incidences and learn how, like the system, in my opinion, has been corrupted. And it's been corrupted because, in my opinion, I don't know why medications that can have such profound, well, I know it's because people want to make money. Like, I know that's why SSRIs can be prescribed so easily. It's because Big Pharma wants more money to be made. But the happy ending of the story is that I definitely 100% don't have bipolar disorder. And I got off of Seroquel, and I've been off Seroquel almost 3 years. But there is one part that I think you might have insight to, and I'd be curious what you say about this. You know, my sleep, I got off Seroquel. I was on Seroquel for 20 months, in my opinion, without any need. And my sleep, I developed like chronic early waking insomnia post Seroquel. And to this day, my sleep, almost 3 years later, is like not where it was.
So the question is that normal that your sleep changed after being on the Seroquel, and that's still going on 3 years later now?
Sort of. It's never been, I would say that it was like, it's gotten a little better, but my one thing that I learned, I take 5-HTP a little bit. So like 5-HTP to me is great because I went and got a neurotransmitter panel last year, and it said that I was depleted in 5-HTP. So to me, it seemed like the 5-HTP could have been like the missing link. And, you know, I talked to ChatGPT about this whole thing. And I was like, you know, do you think when I took the Paxil that my 5-HTP or serotonin was severely depleted, and that like, you know, it said like, you know, then you take Seroquel, you're only masking the problem. So like, it's like not as good as it was. Like I was 7 to 8 hours a night, and it's still like, it could be trauma. It could be like, so I'm not necessarily saying, but I would say the early years, at least a year, there was like 5 hours a night, which is just terrible. So.
Well, after people have adverse reactions, it's quite common for them, especially severe ones like yours, to have symptoms for quite some time, even after they're off the drug. I would say most of them are, for the majority of people, most of them have gone away by 18 months to 2 years. So if you're still having symptoms now, I mean, one thing, you know, I don't know if you're taking any other drugs or supplements at the moment, but
a little bit of 5-HTP.
I'd always. Yeah. I mean, you could see what happens if you come off of that, see if that moves the needle at all. But I don't know if it's at 3 years out, I don't know if it would be medication related. That would be quite a severe.
It makes sense. I mean, it could be trauma.
Yeah.
You know, I know that the nervous system's dysregulated. I mean, obviously I still, you know, I had some difficulty even talking about this event because it's, you know, traumatic event. So that's good to hear. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, Mike, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story. But I want to invite you just to share anything else with the audience, that we haven't gotten around to, which you think may be important for them to know.
Yeah, well, one thing to know about me is I have a background in business and sales and marketing, and ironically, I actually did sales and marketing for pharmaceutical companies, and I study the sales book that sales reps use to sell. And I guess the biggest message I have for people. And I'm going to go on more podcasts and talk about the business side of thing, is that like mental illness, in my opinion now, and you talk about this, is like a contagion where it's like now everybody has like mental illness and everybody has anxiety, and it's really situational causes, and that the pharmaceutical companies and the companies like Hims and Hers are exploiting like this sort of social contagion to be like, okay, why don't you just take an SSRI? Why don't you go to Google? And that's my world. Google ads, Facebook ads. Why don't you just take an SSRI? Like, and not that, and I don't think, and my disclaimer is like, I don't think everybody needs an SSRI first off, but if you're going to take an SSRI, do the evaluation, like do the full 4.5 hour evaluation. I think, and that should be by law. And my closing remark is that, and this is why I believe that there's real corruption happening. As you noted, there is a warning about SSRIs that people that take them should be screened for bipolar. I don't know how it's legal. It should be illegal to prescribe those meds without doing a bipolar screening. And if they don't do that, then if your doctor's not going to do a full evaluation, then I would fire that doctor. And that's all I have to say.
Yeah. Well, Mike, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story.
Okay. Thank you so much. Bye.
If you're curious about the long-term side effects of antidepressants, don't miss this next video where we dive into their lasting impacts and what you need to know.